Welcome back to another spill drop video. Today I decided that I wanted to try a challenge, building a 3x1 factory that took raw materials all the way to the completed stage of crafting rockets. I've never done anything quite like this before, though I have built several factory modules in the past. They have never been quite this comprehensive. This is just version 1, so please take it with a grain of salt and expect that there will be improvements down the line. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into the build. And if you like the video, consider dropping a like down below. Getting started here, we want to make sure that we have the most amount of room in this module. So I flipped these two walls to the hard side in and then upgraded them to stone before I placed my half-high bamboo shelf. Once the shelf is in place, you want to place your storage vessels down. You do need to upgrade this wall frame to sheet metal to fit the 6th one in here, but these frontier barrels also allow you to snap a hopper on the lower level barrel, so you can just toss loot in as you go. I like to use these temporary electrical and industrial components as terminals for my systems, so if I've got, say, like a hopper here with a power node that I'm not ready to tie off to my primary system yet, I'll use this splitter to act as a temporary terminal. That makes things a lot easier to access later on. Once you've got your storage vessels placed, whether they're barrels or boxes, you're going to want to tie them together using storage adapters. This allows for loot overflow in case you have a particularly lucrative farm run. I like to tie these off with an industrial combiner at the end, so it's a little easier to access. Then we're going to place our second shelf. I like to do that by placing a temporary shelf here, so I can get the placement right for the permanent shelf. It's more difficult to get the placement for the electrical furnaces, so I like to place those first to make sure that everything is positioned correctly. Then once that's complete, you'll upgrade this wall frame, and then place your barrel to make sure that sits as well. You can finish this out for 6 total electrical furnaces and 4 storage barrels on this shelf, bringing your storage module up to a total of 10 barrels. Connect all these barrels with adapters and add your second hopper tied into the splitter again for the convenience factor. Now your storage module is complete once you've tied these 4 barrels in to your industrial combiner down below. Then I added my conveyors on this wall frame and a splitter to divide the channels for the raw ore going into the furnaces and the other materials needed for crafting to the crafting module. Make sure you're not forgetting to flip these walls to the hard side in and then back to the soft side in when you're done building out the modules. Add your storage adapters to these electric furnaces and then tie in your conveyors to these furnaces. You'll just need one conveyor tying directly into all 6 of these electric furnaces, and then you'll have your second conveyor tying in to these standard low-grade based furnaces. It can help to place all of your prison cell walls. First, as you see here, I had to go back, remove some of these furnaces, and then replace them because they were obstructing the placement for the prison cell wall. With the furnaces all placed, you're going to want to place your workbenches down. I started with 2 tier 2 workbenches here, but if you've got the funds, you may be able to use tier 3s. Things will just get a little bit more crowded. As I mentioned in my last video, you can use these laser detectors to create an extra shelf on these prison cell walls. That'll give you more options for placing these boxes that are going to take the materials from the storage room and from these furnaces into these auto crafters. I did build this in kind of a flow state, so I may have made some mistakes along the way, so please forgive me as I make improvements and changes throughout the video. Once you've got all your boxes placed, get your tier 3, the 2 auto crafters for that placed, and then your medium battery. You can reach this small box underneath the tier 2 just by squeezing between these 2 in the front. Flip your walls back around to make sure that you've got the hard side facing out, upgrade your wall frames, and then you can get to the complicated stuff. Going from left to right, these conveyors are going to move materials for crafting the explosives, then the rockets, then they're going to move the rockets into the box for collection at the end of the factory. The top auto crafter on the tier 3 is going to make the explosives, the bottom crafter on the tier 3 is going to make the rockets. It was at this point that I realized that I didn't have enough conveyors moving stuff from the collection boxes into this system to craft the explosives. So I added an additional conveyor here to move the materials that I was pretty sure I needed for the explosives into this module here, and then as an output for pipes into the rocket crafter as well. I added an output conveyor and combiner here for the 2 furnace stacks that we've got, moving the cooked sulfur and charcoal and eventually metal fragments into the crafting section of this factory. Initially, I planned to craft pipes in this factory as well, just from raw scrap, to keep everything entirely in-house. However, I quickly realized that I would need a tier 3 to craft pipes, so unfortunately this design will rely on pipes being deposited into the collection module before any rockets can be crafted. These 3 conveyors on the ceiling will feed the 3 auto crafters that are making gunpowder. Keep in mind that using these floating boxes on the prison cell wall is not an intended feature, and it is an exploit, so these prison cell bars may block access to some of the input or output nodes on these adapters, and you may need to reposition or use a different adapter slot. I'm tying all of the tier 2 auto crafters into combiners on this back wall, starting with the primary crafters that are making gunpowder. These will then be combined into an additional combiner that will tie our 4th auto crafter making the low-grade fuel and any other raw materials that are needed for explosives or rockets into the combiner, where they will then flow into the last 2 tier 3 auto crafters. Another pro tip is to copy and paste the filters that you create for the conveyors that are using the same materials to craft the same things. Just makes it a little bit quicker for you. And I tied all of these auto crafters into the pass-through node on the conveyors to keep things a little bit more simple in the electrical grid. Once the gunpowder autocrafters were set up, I moved the low-grade autocrafter up to the front here and changed the filters so that it was taking in cloth and animal fat to craft low-grade. Again, all of these tier 2 autocrafters are funneling into these combiners that you see on the back wall, as well as an additional input coming from the primary storage. One of the pitfalls of building these modules before you properly test them, and for being a solo player who rarely makes it beyond tier 2, is that I completely ignored the actual recipe for making explosives and substituted the metal fragments in that actual recipe for cloth, which isn't really needed for that particular recipe. In general, I find that it's easier to use the pass-through node for the conveyors to power the objects that they are conveying to. That way, the circuit is a little bit more simplified, and you'll know when something is getting power, where that power is coming from, and how much power is going to be needed. I realized a little too late that I ran out of power for this module and it required an additional small battery to be added. Now for future versions of this build, I think I've found a good way to replace that small battery. So if you want to see this factory module rebuilt with a little bit more knowledge on the offset, let me know down in the comments and I will work on version 2 as quick as I can. And at this moment I realized that nothing was happening and I realized why. So I changed the filters to allow metal ore to flow into the furnaces and for metal fragments to flow into the crafters. That allowed for the explosives to be crafted, flowing into the rocket crafter straight after. Now we wait to see what happens with this process. Keep in mind that on this server, for some reason, wood does not actually burn in these furnaces, so I wasn't able to get them to produce charcoal automatically, which may have stifled the results. When I try this again, I'm going to try to find a build server that lets me generate charcoal to see how well this works with a set amount of resources. But for now, that's all that I've got for you today. A 3x1 rocket factory from raw materials all the way to the finished product. In future iterations of this factory, I hope to include more options for crafting all of the materials required for the final crafts. However, that may be a little bit more complicated and certainly a bit more expensive. If you have any special requests for later variants of this factory, let me know down in the comments and I will do my best to make those a reality. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more super modules like these, consider subscribing to the Spill Drop channel. Thank you again for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.